Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this webinar about whether schools are unwittingly contributing to their students' mental health issues with Dr. Tara Porter, who's a psychologist, young person's mental health expert, and a best-selling author. Now, this is the first in a series of webinars looking at the state of mental well-being in school-aged children, where we're inviting experts to share their thoughts and to offer you all some practical strategies that you can incorporate into everyday school life to help all students. Now, after Dr. Porter has finished speaking, can you submit any, we can submit them now if you have others, but anything on her presentation, please submit afterwards in the chat. But please remember this webinar is being recorded and will be shared at a later date. So please be careful if you're talking about pupils not to say anything that might identify them. But before we go over to Tara, let's hear from Claire Wensley, Compass Head of Sales.
Thank you. Could we move on to the next slide, please? And yeah, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Claire Wensley, and I'm Head of Sales at Compass Education. I therefore head up everything to do with sales at Compass, but have recently been leading our work with the Welsh education market as I'm based here in sunny South Wales. So I think it's fair to say that most teachers and parents are aware that record numbers of young people are struggling with their mental health. There may be some debate about the cause. It could be the pandemic, social media, world events, but there is little argument about the numbers or that they are increasing. The NHS and various mental health charities estimate that the proportion of 16-year-olds and under with mental health problems has risen from 1 in 9 only 6 years ago to around 1 in 5 now. And there's not much doubt about where those struggling would first seek help. According to mental health charity Mind, most young people would prefer initially to obtain information and support from their school. There's no reason to doubt that the mental health landscape in Wales is any different to any other parts of the UK, but there is limited data. And to address that information gap, we commissioned independent researchers to survey parents in Wales with at least one child in either primary or secondary school to ask them for their views on children's mental health. And we've been working on this report for quite some time. It's available from Compass Education's website, and the website address is on the screen now. It is a comprehensive report, and it's well worth a good read if it's something that you're interested in. So we wanted to know how worried parents were about the issue, if they thought there were significant differences between primary and secondary school-aged children and between boys and girls, why they thought that children's mental health was declining and what schools could do to help. So a sample of 766 adults in Wales was surveyed online by independent research agency Perspectives Global during January 2024. And all respondents were parents of at least one child in a local authority maintained school. And the results are revealing, basically. Next slide, please. Has Rachel gone? Can we move on to the next slide, please? Oh, there we go. Brilliant. So in short, most parents in Wales are anxious about their children's mental health in both primary and secondary schools. And they are concerned not only because these issues are widespread, but also because for many students, these present fairly frequently. So there's a summary of the sort of findings that we had from the from the report, sorry. So 7 in 10 parents worry about the mental health of their children. A quarter say their children battle with mental health every 2 or 3 days. 1 in 10 say they struggle daily. 2/3 think children hide or try to hide the state of their mental health. And less than a fifth say their children never struggle with their mental health. Older children are a particular concern. Almost half of parents say the mental health of secondary school students is only fair or worse. Peer pressure, social media, and puberty are cited as the main causes of poor mental health. And 7 in 10 say they are worried about their daughters, and well over a quarter believe their mental health has deteriorated over the past year. 4 in 5 parents would like schools to be producing a termly mental health report card. So that's just a bit of information about the report that we've been working. I'm going to hand back to Anne now so that she can pass over to Tara.
Okay, thanks very much, Claire. As you said, there's some worrying results there. So hopefully Tara can tell us how we can help children to deal with some of these pressures that they're facing. So over to you, Tara.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you, Claire. Rachel, I seem to have lost the options to control again. Oh, there they are. No, there we go. Okay, hello everyone. My name's Dr. Tara Porter. I'm a clinical psychologist and a writer. Here's a little bit about me. Oh. Here's a little bit about me. Oh, this isn't working. I was in CAMS I was lead psychologist in the CAMS department here in London for 20 years. And I wrote this book called You Don't Understand Me, which is now being published in about 20 countries of the world, which seemed to capture quite a lot of people's imagination about what was going on with mental health problems, and seems to be kind of a universal some universal factors that we're seeing around the world, from the response I've had from the book about all around the world. Okay. So today I'm actually going to do 2 extra things to what it says on the slide. I'm going to do an introduction to children and adolescents' mental health and give you a couple of models to think about mental health. And then I'm going to think more about the application to the school setting. And as Anne and Claire commented, I'm going to try and give some practical ideas about what might help when you see young people struggling with their mental health. Okay, so as Claire introduced, there's been a massive increase over the time I've been working in children and adolescents' mental health over the last 20 years. This study was a UK-based study, and it showed that 1.1 million children were referred to CAMS in the year 21 to 22, which accounts for about 18.7% of the UK school-aged child population, which is just incredible. It used to be that CAMS was something, when I used to say I worked in CAMS 20 years ago, people didn't know what CAMS was, and now it's become kind of mainstream that there's so many kids struggling that we all have to know what it is. And these statistics are from the Big Ask, which is the Children's Commissioner's study of what's been going on with mental health. And like the Compass study, it shows that the girls are much more likely than boys to be struggling with their mental health, and particularly those teenage girls. And as we heard from the Compass study, about 1/3 of parents in Wales think their children's mental health is less than good. And again, especially if it's a girl. So to understand this, we really got to think about what mental health is. And when we think about mental health, we often think about feelings, but I would propose to you that there's 4 aspects of mental health that I'd like you to think about. The feelings are obviously the starting point. So the words like depression and anxiety, those represent common feelings that we have every day in our lives, more extreme versions. So, sadness is the depression, the anxiety, the worries. But these are part of the problem, but they're not the whole of the problem. Often these feelings, the mental health problems, are underlined by difficult thoughts, thoughts which are out of proportion, thoughts which last too long, thoughts which are self-critical, difficult thoughts that are going on in the young person's head. And that's really the crux of what the mental health problem is. They often show up in young people's behavior. So in mental health, we often see behaviors. So for example, in OCD, we might see behaviors where children are having to repeat actions or check things. In eating disorders, we see behaviors such as young people limiting the amount or the range of food which they're eating. So that's the 3rd element. And then, of course, in the physiology, mental health exists in our bodies. We often think about a mind-body split, but really that isn't true. When people feel anxious, their heart beats a bit faster, they talk a bit faster, they breathe a bit faster, their pH of their blood changes, lots of changes go on in the body. There isn't that separation. So when we're thinking about mental health, we have to think about those 4 components in the young person. And mental health is best thought of as a continuum. It's not a case that the mental health exists. It's they're not verified diseases that exist in people there. It's a continuum. We think about, young people having mental health problems when their thoughts and their feelings and their behaviours, which last, are difficult, and they last for a long time, and they're out of proportion, and they're interfering with everyday life. But on the other hand, at the other end of the continuum is it's normal to have worries, to feel sad. These difficult feelings can happen every day. They don't interfere with life. If they're quickly shrugged off, or if they're in proportion to events, then we don't think of that as a mental health problem. But also, I think it's really important to think about mental health in a social context. And so here, where I've got the pupil in the center there, inside the pupil, we've got those 4 components: their behavior, their feelings, their physiology, and their thoughts, but they exist in a context. And all of these factors can act to promote young people's mental health, or they can act as a difficulty towards their mental health. So when we think about, and often, things that happen are both positive and a negative towards people's mental health. But I guess what I've seen over the 20 odd years I've been doing this work is that there have been really some changes in all of these levels, which have really impacted on young people's mental health in a kind of negative way. And I often give the example of at a societal level that we're much more globally connected. And we might think that global connection, that's a good thing, right? We all like going on foreign holidays. We like having access to different sorts of foods. We welcome people from other countries into our society. But on the other hand, the negatives of that are that young people can feel like we have the PISA assessments, and young people can feel like they're being competing against on a global stage. They can feel that where they're globally connected through the internet, that anything that they do which is stupid can become an internet meme and pass around the world very, very quickly. I mean, I think all of us who remember something stupid we did as a teenager would be horrified to think that somebody would maybe uploading it or taking a photo of it, and then it would be there for posterity. So things like the sense of global connection can be both a positive or a negative to people's mental health. So if we think about that, there's changes the way young people live their lives at every one of these levels. So I brought up the global connectedness from the societal level, obviously the internet and the social media. That's made it a much more visual culture compared to a generation ago. We've got the pandemic, that's another global factor that's impacted on people's mental health. In the community level, I would see the rise of 2 parents working. There's been sort of breakdown in community bonds from that. And it's not a bad thing, I say, as a working mum, but it's one of the things that can impact on young people's mental health. The way that schools are parents have more school choice. Again, we think that's a good thing, but what it often means is that children are traveling further away to their schools. They've got less sense of local community. There's less informal play going on. There's more adult-led activities. At school, we know there's increased scrutiny. There's much more outcome-based education. There's increased competition for school places, for university places, for jobs. As we know, the friends level, I think, is the level that's changed the least, but we know that it's mediated more through the screen and less in real life, and that can lead to less connection between people and more comparison. At a family level, we have busier parents who focus much more on outcome and expectations. So this has become these changes that I've seen in society over the time I've been doing that work, and I guess we would see this is a culture where mental health problems are growing. And in fact, I would say if it was a mass experiment into how, we'd have to say it's a failure. There's so many young people suffering these days. It's a fast-paced, outcome-based society where kids are often being encouraged to do better and get more. And the comparison and the competition take precedence over the connection and compassion. And the girls seem particularly sensitive to this message. So what I see in my clinic when I'm talking to young people is that they feel these levels of these expectations from their friends, from their families, from the school, from the social media, and all these pressures sort of funnel down to give them these sort of sense of expectations inside them that they should be doing this, they ought to be doing that. and they feel that they can never meet these expectations. And when I talk to young people, and I talk to young people with eating disorders and depression, anxiety, young people who self-harm, all sorts of different diagnoses, there's this common thread of these feelings that they're not good enough, these relentless expectations that they can't meet. And that's what is underlying so many of the mental health difficulties that we see these days. How they say that to me is they say, I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not popular enough. I'm not clever enough. I'm not going to do well enough in my grades. I'm not good looking enough. And this comes from kids who are, you know, brilliant and smart and gorgeous and wonderful and funny. But they are, or a lot of the young people I see in clinic just don't feel enough. So how does that play into mental health problems? So we've got all these different expectations there at the top: the school, schoolwork, the family expectations, friendships, rules and expectations from them, the internet, social media, and they play into the mental health through the thoughts. Yeah. So young people see these expectations around them, and they develop these thoughts about not being good enough. And I sort of thought I'd play that out in two different ways, back to this idea of the mental health existing at 4 levels within the young person. Okay, so this is number one. The first way I'm going to play it out for you to show you how it can show up in mental health difficulties. And this is kind of like a young person who I might call a perfectionistic young person, that often presents as anxiety or OCD or eating disorders in the sort of formal language of diagnosis. But what we hear when I talk to them is, I must do my best in every situation. Everyone expects it of me. I hear all the time, gosh, if I had a pound for every time I'd heard this, my teachers will be disappointed in me. Nobody likes me, very common one. And this plays out. Of course, if you think like this, you're going to feel sad and lonely, anxious. That's going to be a natural way to feel. And often young people try and lessen these thoughts by working really hard, but however hard they work and they never feel like it's enough, there's always something extra that they can be doing, you know. And also the competing demands of that young people feel. So if they work really hard on their studies, then they feel like they're not spending enough time with their friends, or they feel they're not spending enough time with their families, and whatever they do, they feel they can't reach their internalized expectations of what's required of them. So a second way that this can play out is a kind of disillusioned young person. So I see how the young person I might see, the problem they might come to me with is that they're out of school, perhaps they're being homeschooled. I'm getting a lot of referrals for that these days. That's probably not a surprise to you. School refusers, but sometimes also with the aggressive stuff, the kids who show up in youth offending teams. This is some of the stuff that they have going on. And they feel like overwhelmed. They feel like I can't do this. School offers no path for me. I'm not good enough. I'm not achieving. And we all know about how some of the changes in the GCSEs and have, you know, made very high standards. Just going through it with one of mine at the moment and sitting down to do the maths GCSE, and even with a maths A-level and a bachelor's in science and a doctorate in a science as well. You know, the maths GCSE is very challenging, and it can lead young people to feel like they're not good enough. Again, that feeling of not good enough. But this time the behavior is to stop trying, to disengage, the truancy, the antisocial behavior. The feelings come out, same sort of feelings, but often they come out in anger instead of this typical way boys will show their difficult feelings is through anger. They can become disenfranchised from society, from school, from their families. So same sort of problems, but 2 different outcomes. Excuse me, I just need to blow my nose. So what I'm seeing is this sort of perfect storm of pressure. And now in the second half of my presentation, I'm going to go on and talk a little bit about the school level and what's going on in schools that's contributing towards this. But I just wanted to put this slide up to say that I'm not blaming schools. I'm not blaming anyone. It's a complicated problem. It's a perfect storm of factors that seem to have existed in this society at this time. that are contributing towards young people's mental health problems. But because I'm talking to teachers in schools today, we're going to focus more on that one. But when I talk to parents, I talk about what they're doing, and and often when I talk to young people, I talk about the internet and what's going on in that. So there's lots of different factors that are contributing, but I'm going to particularly focus on schools. So this is data from the Children's Society. Oh, why has it gone forward? Back. Sorry about that. This is data. The Children's Society do an annual survey of 40,000 children, I think it is, every year. From here, we've got from 2009, which has provided a real insight over this last 14 years into what's going on for young people. And this is girls and boys. Girls are the green and boys are the orange, and about how happy they are with their life as a whole. And this is probably not a surprise for you that we're seeing this decline, because this is what all the statistics show. So the Children's Society, like I say, every year they're monitoring this. And a few years ago, they started to ask why. And they also asked children questions about specific areas of their life. So they ask about family, they ask about friends. And there's two areas that are consistently coming up as showing up as the difficult areas for young people. And the two areas are with their appearance, probably not a surprise, with the social media, with the visual culture that I referred to earlier, but the second area is schools. So here on the left, we've got mean happiness on both these charts, and with school and with schoolwork over the years from 2009 to the last data set point on this is 2020 on this one. And again, so what we're seeing is that children are becoming less happy with school. And when the Children's Society really analysed this, what they found that wasn't that they didn't like their teachers, or that they were disliking their teachers more, or anything like that. It wasn't about bullying. It really was about the schoolwork, the exam pressure that was the causing, accounting in the statistics, quite a lot of the unhappiness that children were seeing. And I really put a lot of weight in these statistics because it's not a sort of one-off survey. It's that the Children's Society have been looking at this for so many years, so we can really kind of trust that their data is picking up something. And why is that? Well, as I've been doing this work, and I also used to do some work for Anne at TESS, and read about schools and go into schools and talk to parents and teachers and obviously the young people, and observe it from the outside, from my position at camps. What I saw was that over the years that the kids have been getting less happy. There's been repeated reform of the exam system and curriculum, and increased scrutiny and comparison of schools. It's become an arms race on qualifications and grades. We've changed from, back in my day, we had the O level with a grade A, and then we changed to the GCSE, and then we subdivided the A into the A and the A star, and then we changed it all again to the numbers, and we subdivided the A star into a 9 and an 8. And this is kind of an arms race. It's constantly raising the pressure on kids that they need to get more, they need to work harder, they're competing for a smaller pot. And this, we know from Ofsted, obviously, and Ested in Wales, that the changes that how schools graded and what pressure that puts on you all, and how that can unwittingly play out in terms of children feeling pressure on doing well on their stats, or pressure to do well on their GCSE grades. And how schools can be, ranked in national newspapers as being a better or worse school on the basis of these Ofsted judgments, or on the basis of young people's grades. But all that kind of can trickle down to make young people feel the pressure. So what can we do about it? This is the kind of $1 million question. And I guess when we think about that, there's 3 different streams that we might think of, that we can provide better mental health for young people in schools. And the first one is to do the teaching about mental health, and to, on the left-hand side here, the the religious and social and health education to provide things like teaching about mindfulness, or to teach them about different types of mental health problems. Then we have the second stream, which is the kind of positive whole school approaches to improving well-being. And that's about looking at people's ethos and standards, looking at structural approaches to changing the schools, and about the general pastoral care. And then we can have the third strand, which is supporting young people who've been identified as having mental health problems. So identifying those who are in need, talking to young people with mental health problems, and the kind of the formal counselling services. And I guess when we start with the stream on the far left, there's been very little evidence that this sort of teaching young people about mental health, or teaching them mental health strategies to improve their mental health has, you know, in the research shows very little improvement in young people's mental health. That feels a bit depressing, I know to say. Let me show you the next slide. So the Head Start this is available from the Anna Freud Centre in conjunction with UCL. And this was a huge project. It was £67 million programme, and it was investing in some of the poorest areas in England, and it went over many years. And you know, people were trying to do innovative but research-based interventions for young people in schools. And actually what the research showed at the end of the project was incredibly, initially it feels somewhat depressing, that looking across the programme, we could not identify a statistically significant overall impact of either the targeted or universal Head Start support on young people's mental health and well-being. Wow, you know, I mean, some of these projects sounded fantastic when you read about them. I've put one back here, and Bounce Back, a school-based small group mental health intervention, aims to improve children's understanding of resilience and well-being, support them in their confidence and friendships, and provide practical skills to help them make positive choices and changes. And actually, this one actually did show a small improvement on its own, but the whole project didn't show any improvement in the young people who had this intervention in their schools. So that feels a little bit, perhaps a little bit depressing on the first thought, but actually I don't think so. So Professor Jess Dainton, who oversaw the whole of the research, it's really back to basics. You know, when you read her comments about it, it's developing trusted relationships with young people and people who don't necessarily see them as mental health support. And what I'd like to say to you, what that means is that, you know, your relationship with your pupils matters tremendously for their mental health. Whether you're teaching maths or history or PE, whether you're a form teacher, whether you think of yourself as a pastoral care leader or not, this your relationship with these young people matters a lot. So the report says school staff are not mental health professionals, and nor should they be, but staff can be encouraged to understand how being a consistent, trusted person in a young person's life is important. And really, this is what all the mental health literature shows, that, as I talked about at the beginning, that comparison and competition can sometimes get in the way of connection and compassion. And connection and compassion are really the things we're looking for in improving young people's mental health. So this is what I want to focus on really as your takeaway message: compassion, trying to understand where those young people are coming from, and connection. I mean, actually, compassion and connection is sort of 90% of what I do as a therapist, really. You know, you go to therapy school and learn lots of different techniques and lots of different therapies and have lots of practice, but really it's about listening and connecting, having that empathy where for the young person, and really understanding where they're coming from really makes a difference in young people's mental health. So, and I wonder about all the changes in education, which have, you know, and in life as general, which has taken us away from that point with children and putting them on this sort of path where they have to achieve, is really undermining the kind of sense of compassion and connection. So I'm encouraging you to connect back to that. So this idea of epistemic trust, an adult who gets a kid, that's what we're talking about here. And that's what the kids really value. So kids want support to achieve. They want to have hope in the future. I talked about those two different types of kids, the kind of perfectionistic ones or the disenfranchised kids, and both of them want to have hope in the future, not either for the perfectionist one, just one where they have to work all the time, but also for the disenfranchised young person, for them to see a future for themselves. And that's what I would like to say is your kind of your solutions really to the mental health problems, I guess. Thank you for listening. I wonder if there's any questions for me.
Thank you very much, Tara. It's fascinating as always. If you do have any questions, please pop them in the chat and I'll put them to Tara. In the meantime, because you're always so thought-provoking, I've got some questions for you as I'm thinking about what you were saying as you were going through. One of the things that sort of immediately sprang to mind when you were talking about friends and the fact that children don't have their friendships in real life, that they are on screen. How much do you think the changes in school structures is impacting this as well? Because we've got break times and play times being cut, so children have less time. There's more it's more regimented. And I know some schools have like a family lunch, which is great, but that also is structured. So everything is structured. How do we need to have more unstructured, and then will the sort of behavior then be impacted? Because obviously schools need to keep behavior in check, and that's why they do all these things. So what are your views on that?
Yeah, let's just go speak to the behavior thing first of all, because that is really tricky, isn't it? And that's why us as adults like to take control, because we want to control behavior. But another way of controlling behavior is through connection, and it's through understanding. And I'm not going to say that that's the answer for every school, because I know that schools pick up very different cohorts, and obviously we have to trust head teachers to make the right choices for their schools and their cohorts of what's right. But of course, if I'm putting connection and compassion at the center of my kind of mental health argument here, I have to think that it's really important that kids have that time where they have unstructured time with each other, that they can make those bonds. And we know ourselves that those can be really important bonds that can last a lifetime with the young people that we hang out with at school. So yeah, we have to think about that as a whole, don't we? We have to balance that with, obviously, in some settings, bullying can be a real problem, or kids being out of control could be a real problem, but how we can give kids time in a less formal manner to be with each other, but also be with their teachers, and have time that is not a completely rigid, driven timetable where they can never have an informal conversation with their teachers. Because what we know is that having a young person having a teacher feel, take an interest in them, the teacher showing that young person matters to them, is really important.
It changes people's lives, children's
It
lives.
changes
To
people's
have
lives.
that one teacher who takes an interest in you will
Yes.
change your life. So yeah, it's really important. That's really interesting you say that. The other thing sorry?
Yeah, I'll just finish off here, because so often when I'm talking to young people who are brought to me in clinic, sometimes it takes me a year for them to tell me this. It's really terrible stuff has happened to them which they've not told anyone about. Sometimes that's bullying, but sometimes it's a sexual assault, or sometimes it's abuse. And so when kids and I'm not saying that all kids who misbehave have got something horrendous in their background. Obviously some kids are just bit naughty, but there's
And it's
often
important to remember that, and not always try to medicalize conditions that children have, which are just they're naughty, and that's fine. And, you know, you just have to deal with that, I guess. But there is a difference between naughty and sort of out of control. So
Yeah.
it's like, you
But
know,
I
you're
guess
saying
one
mental
would, you know,
health on a spectrum.
it's on a spectrum, yeah. And I guess that teacher taking an interest and asking, you know, what's going on at home and how are you? And is there anything you want to talk about can really make a difference, you know, because young people have often got really awful stuff where they've been, you know, slut shamed online or, you know, whatever it is, stuff that we adults, you know, don't know about in their lives.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. Sort of picking up on that. But slut shaming isn't normally something that's done to girls. You've sort of touched upon the fact that girls tend to internalize their problems, the boys externalize their problems and their emotions. And we don't know whether that's nature or nurture, but what's your hunch on that? And, you know, what can we do to help? Because we don't want to change it. We don't want to make the girls like the boys, and we don't want to make the boys like the girls, because, you know, we don't want boys to internalize, but we don't want the girls to externalize. So, you know,
Yeah,
what
no,
can be done?
it's a difficult one, that one. What's my hunch on that? I've no idea really. I mean, it starts young. You know, when you see girls in playgrounds, so girls in playgrounds tend to form little huddles and chat to each other. And how we might think about that is that they're sharing a mental space. Their sharing is about talking about the same thing, thinking about the same thing, having the same thing in mind. With boys, little boys tend to run around. They tend to, you know, grab a ball or play football or play tag. And that's a generalization. And at a younger age, they both do both. But so it seems to be quite nature-ish. I mean, I guess what we're trying to do is to help people express their emotions by whichever way feels appropriate for them. And so for girls, they often fall quite naturally into a therapeutic kind of being able to talk about their problems, whereas boys often might want to do something while they're either talking about it or to get the feelings out. I can remember saying to a boy once, "So would you like to talk about that?" And he went, "That's the last thing I'd like to do." You know. That was a comeuppance for me. I had to find a different way. So I don't know. I mean, I think really we want them to have less difficult feelings. Yeah, we want them to be better supported, to be able to talk to adults from an early age and not have to be developing mental health problems to cope with the pressure they're under. We want kids to be under less pressure, or I want the kids to be under less pressure so that they don't have to have these difficult feelings in the first place.
Okay, thank you. We've got a question from somebody, Pete. He says, my school is due an inspection soon. Tara touched on this a little bit, but I'm interested in the speaker's views on whether Ofsted and the inspection framework helps or hinders a school's focus on pupil well-being and mental health.
I probably don't know enough about it. I mean, I've been a school governor, so I've experienced it from that angle, and obviously I've read lots of Ofsted reports. What I felt, or what I was touching on in the talk, is how those, you know, there's a lot of debate about the one word judgment on the schools, isn't it? And this word, you know, it's outstanding or good or requires improvement or whatever. And I think they become a very unhelpful way of judging a school. And then parents kind of get on that bandwagon and want to get their kid into the best school possible. And that might then mean traveling further away to the school, which breaks down the community bonds, puts pressure on families, creates competition for people competing for places. If there's anything the kid has to do to get into the school, like, you know, secondary school, take an exam or anything, that could be another pressurizing factor. So all of that increases the pressure. I can't really comment on the Ofsted framework well enough to know whether that improves or hinders. Perhaps if you feed me one thing that you think might be unhelpful, I can comment on that particular thing. I'm not, but not as a whole.
Well, it certainly seems to sort of have an impact on head teachers and teachers' mental health from what we've seen.
Well, yeah,
But
yeah,
and
that
I
all
guess
down.
it trickles down, because if there's anxiety from amongst the staff, then it's quite hard not to let the children see it, is it? So, yeah. So if the person who asked that question wants to ask a follow-up, something more specific about the framework, then I can put that to Tara. I've got another question. Are there any proven strategies or really great examples of whole school approaches to improving well-being that you've come across in your career?
That's a really difficult question. I'm sure I have. I can't think of them. I can't draw them to mind. I mean, I think I would just have to take it back to that sense of teachers trying to do what they probably went into the job to do, to teach well and to give kids opportunities, but also not to get swayed by the other stuff about, you know, that every kid has to reach their full potential. Who reaches their full potential, you know? I mean, to do their best by kids, but not to be putting this kind of undue pressure on kids. And how you do that in a whole school setting is really tricky. I think. I think it's that balance, isn't it? Because schools have to cater to a whole cohort, and yet actually every child is on their individual pathway, aren't they? You know, and you've got the high achievers and the people who are less likely to achieve, and making all of them feel valued seems really important. You know, that's idea of school being an introduction to society. I mean, one of the things that I'm passionate about is the forgotten third, the third of kids who don't get their maths and English GCSE. You know, that's terrible, because that sets them off on a pathway where they've kind of failed before they've even got into life. And so how you give kids that sense of value to which they can take out to start their adult journey, I think is really, you know, a key question, with, you know, a failure rate that we have no control over.
Okay, well, we've got Pete who can explain more what he means and ask you his questions. So if Rachel, you could turn on his mic, that'd be great, and he can ask directly, or he can turn his mic on. I don't know if one of you can do it, that'd be great. And then I can't misrepresent what he wants to say. So
yeah, I've pressed the button. Can you hear me?
yes, we can. Thanks, Pete.
Hi,
Hi,
Pete.
yeah. Hi. So I should declare I do also work for Compass, but I'm a chair of governors, and that's the angle I was asking the question. So it's a federation of 2 primary schools in rural West Berkshire. I won't name them, obviously, but yeah, one of their schools is due an inspection any moment. It's a school that has a very much above average proportion of pupils with SEND, and within that pupils with the HCPs. And so and they're also not big schools as well. So, you know, we have classrooms where you know, there are a very notable proportion of children who struggle with lots of elements of school life, and learning is part of it, behaviour is part of it. And I have absolutely no doubt that their confidence, their resilience, and their well-being is mixed up in all of that as well. And you know, as part of our Ofsted readiness, we had some training yesterday looking at what do inspectors look for, what do they expect from school leadership, school management, and it was very helpful training. But what came out of it for me was a feeling that somewhere in there something's being a bit missed, and it's kind of a lot of the things that you were talking about, Tara, of like, these young people are individuals and they're battling with lots of things, and lots of things are changing in their world, and a school is undoubtedly part of that. It's a very big part of that. You talked a lot about connection, and that just didn't seem to feature anywhere in the things that you have to show to an inspector to get a good outcome. Like it was all, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's all good stuff. It's curriculum, it's leadership, it's safeguarding, really important things. But no one really talked about other children and students happy, and are they connecting with each other and forming meaningful relationships that are going to set them for the future? There was none of that, and I don't know. I knew this webinar was coming, and it just made me feel a little bit empty, I guess, about all of that.
Well, Pete, you sound like a great person to have as the chair of governors on the for these schools, and I would carry on doing what you're doing, and prioritize those things. And whether Ofsted come and see that in their frameworks, I don't know. We're not in control of that, but we know what's important, and we all know that's important, right? We all know that it's important that a teacher gets a kid, and the kid is likes their teacher and feels their teacher's on their side and interested in them and they're able to talk to them, and so I guess you've just got to do what you do and think and know that it's the right thing to do, and whether Ofsted value it or not is not in our control.
Yeah,
That's
and
not
it will be
helpful.
interesting, won't it? And you know, we're probably similar to. I mean, I'm sure that there's other schools and school leaders on this webinar, I'm sure, and I would imagine an awful lot of them would take pride in how well they know their pupils. You know,
Exactly.
it's the thing that every school should do really well, and do all do really well. And yeah, it just doesn't seem to be the thing that gets checked too much. But we'll see. I mean, hey, I might be pleasantly surprised. Who knows? This is my first go as being inspected as chair of governors, so I may be pleasantly surprised. But
I can remember when I was a school governor, I was responsible for safeguarding, and I had to go in and check the single had to be a single record of all the safeguarding
single central
information.
record, yeah.
Yeah. And it just seemed like such a waste of, I don't know, it just felt like, was this the most important thing that I could be doing in terms of checking that everyone's had provided exactly the right tick boxes of this and that? So I don't know. I mean, it's has it become a tick box exercise? I'm not sure. But I think if you know what these kids need, I think that matters, I guess, more.
Probably
really
a nice point to finish on. So good luck with your inspection, Pete.
Oh, really? Yeah,
All
fingers crossed.
goes well. I just want to move, and I've got another couple of questions I'd really like to get in. So, would you comment, Tara, on universal whole school approaches to pupils' emotional health and well-being versus targeted intervention with specific groups? And tell us which has better outcomes, both in the short and the longer term. And in a time, especially when budgets for pastoral support are being cut, it'd be really helpful to know where best to put resources and focus.
I think that's a really difficult question because
We like that. We like to put you on the spot, Tara.
yeah, I mean it's really difficult. I mean, that Head Start report, have a look at that. That's really interesting. That's on the Anna Freud website. Because that really goes into the detail of stuff, and they didn't find any significant research in terms of research, any significant results for any of their interventions, really. It just did not show an improvement. And I see in the news all the time, the call for more money to CAMS, and I've worked in CAMS for 20 years. Yeah, we needed more money, but in a way we needed not to, we got bigger and bigger. We actually needed to get smaller and smaller because we needed, yes, less people with mental health problems. That's the thing. Desmond Tutu said, you've got to stop pulling people out of the stream and go upstream and see why they're falling in. And so I think that's the question we need to be asking, really, for young people. And so if whole school initiatives are about the stuff that Pete was just talking about getting to know every pupil, making sure every pupil is on a pathway, whether that pupil is going to succeed and show the school in a good light, or whether that pupil is not going to be academically successful but is going to feel valued and come away from school with feeling like they matter, and having some friendships and a next thing to do. that would feel like the most important thing we can do for mental health and for youth offending, actually, you know, which I see as two sides of the same coin. The boys often show up in youth offending. They don't show up so much in CAMS, but it's the same feelings that they've got, that they're not good enough, that they don't matter to anyone, those sorts of feelings.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah,
Can I
difficult
ask,
question.
it is a difficult question, so I'm going to ask you a slightly easier one.
Oh, good, thanks.
Well, I hope it's easier. How would you approach the child that you can see is struggling but is suppressing this struggle? What would you do as a teacher? What would you advise a
I mean,
teacher to do?
I mean, the thing about it is, and this is really difficult for teachers because you're on, you know, the academic requirements. I'm thinking particularly in secondary school, you know, GCSEs and getting through that, all the stuff that you have to cover is really hard. But, you know, kids need time, you know, and if there's two things I would say to go in with to that encounter, it would be empathy and curiosity. Okay, so when I'm sitting with a kid, I'm curious about what's going on in their mind. I'm setting myself the target that I need to know what that kid's going on in their head. I want to see the world as they see it. So I'm asking them questions about that. You know, what's going on for you? How are you doing? How are you feeling? I saw you the other day. I wondered what was happening. You know, the curiosity, not the, oh, I'm worried about you, not the, oh, I think you've got this, but just the curiosity about what's going on. And you do that with the empathy of wanting to understand, so empathy, that feeling of understanding what another person is thinking. And again, you know, this is so much of what I just do in therapy. And when people have that sense of empathy, that somebody gets them, going back to the epistemic trust, somebody gets them, somebody understands them, somebody spent that little bit of time with them, who's asked them, who's caught their eye, who said, yeah, come over here, let's see what's going on for you. That's the stuff that you need, curiosity and empathy.
That's a really good point to close on from you, Tara. I mean, because that's with any child, isn't it? So it's whether one's struggling. That's what they want. Somebody who's curious about their life, their emotions, how they're feeling that day, and to empathise with them. I mean, what more can you want? And then you've got
That's what we all want.
teacher who gets, we all, well, absolutely. So I'll see you later about that.
I
But
think
thank
of
you.
curiosity and empathy as like your mental health first aid kit. So, you know, how you have like a cold pack that you put on their bruises when they bump their heads, or some plasters. Your empathy and curiosity are the mental health equivalents.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. That was really interesting. Can I then now pass back to Claire for her final thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it leads on nicely from Tara talking about the mental health first aid kit and going on to more of a technology inspired toolkit for mental health and well-being and things like that. So, you know, going back to the findings in the report that we talked about at the beginning, one of the revealing insights was that 4 in 5 parents wanted this mental health report card. And, you know, as school leaders and teachers know, to address an issue, you've got to have the means to tackle it. So, you know, they can't be expected to deal with a problem if the tools to identify and monitor it aren't to hand. And this is especially true of behaviour and wellbeing in schools, I would say. And as a parent of school-aged children myself, primary school-aged children in Wales, I'm naturally interested in how schools are addressing student wellbeing, because I'm obviously going to be concerned about my own children as they progress through the education framework. And as the results of the survey made clear, parents in Wales are extremely concerned that too many of the children in schools are struggling with mental health issues, and parents are looking to schools to help them support their own children. So to be able to assess the state of their students' wellbeing, schools have first got to be able to accurately record behaviour, track it over time, and allow teachers to analyse and report on it. And this is where technology can obviously help, and Compass being a child-centric management information system, which now probably being used by about 3,000 schools across the UK, Ireland and Australia. It's highly adaptable. It allows schools to monitor student wellbeing accurately and in real time. And Chronicle, as you can see on the screen, which is undoubtedly one of Compass's hero modules, I would say, is basically our wellbeing and mental health, safeguarding, SEN, everything combined tool, which can be configured to support additional learning needs or SEN, record and refer safeguarding issues, reward positive behaviour, analyse trends over time, and produce automatic reports for parents and colleagues as well. It can be configured in line with school policies. It's adaptable and flexible in terms of templates, and the ability to enable notifications and triggers that informs only those with the correct authorization is implemented within it as well. I'd say it's a really comprehensive wellbeing and behaviour system that is capable of accommodating all processes and allows for data to be collated and analysed in one place and with ease. So teachers and senior leadership teams can drill down on individual students or groups of students over time, so getting that information that they need at the right time, and particularly important, I guess, for ESTIN and Ofsted inspections. And the great thing about it as well is that it can send out automatic communications to parents and colleagues, and these communications can be associated with triggers such as merit earned, detention served, attendance, so positive and negative behaviours within the school environment. And the communications associated to chronicle entries also allow for placeholders to be added. So the template will pull relevant information stored in the details of the entry and personalise emails or messages sent to parents and guardians. So it's helping staff stay on top of things, but also saving them time in terms of communications that go out to parents as well. So, I mean, in summary, and this is just, a very, very high level sort of talk about Chronicle, it's a great tool to support behaviour, wellbeing and safeguarding in schools, all of which could ultimately affect positively or negatively on a child's mental health and wellbeing. I'm very, very happy to, speak to anybody who wants to talk more about Compass or Chronicle as a deeper dive as well. So if anybody does want to do that, if they can let us know in the chat and we can pick that up as well. And yeah, that's me. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Claire, and thank you so much to Tara for that great presentation and your generosity in answering all the questions. And thank you to everybody attending this webinar. Do keep an eye out for details of the next webinar from Luke Rees on to the 21st of May. And do visit the Compass Education website to download a free copy of the new Mental Health in Wales report. And remember, it's all about curiosity and empathy. So thank you and goodbye.